To someone living in a concentration camp, geography would not have the same meaning. People who are worked to death and subjected to experiments that will test their limits as to how much damage they can withstand will not have a standard sense of geography because they have nowhere to go. This is seen in the B movie, I think, in that Barry sees numbers that don't have anything to do with where he is, even though they're out in the human world, when this is the disturbing bit. And the numbers ought to mean something to humans. But when he's in the car, where he's swatted at and the family around him panics, there's a readout of where the family is supposed to be in the GPS as latitude and longitude. There's a map of the greater New York area, but the number is 32 degrees north latitude and 85 degrees west longitude. This is not New York. It's a point just inside the Georgia-Alabama border, immediately to the east of the Chattahoochie River. It's literally almost way down yonder on the Chattahoochee, not in New York at all. And the numbers that are quoted have to do with threats that Barry will face later on in the movie, and that all bees will face, perhaps. Bees, domestic honeybees, are supposed to be about 5 million years old. The greater category, taxonomically, of bees is supposed to be about 80 million years old. Add those together, you get 85 million years, and that's the number of the longitude on the screen. More directly, it's the sum total of impacts that Barry suffers in the course of the movie, and ultimately with the impacts with which he is threatened later on. He is struck by a set of pages, 10 pages, and he says 75 is our limit. So if he got 10, if he took 75 pages and he added another 10 to it, that would be beyond what Barry could survive. That's 85. And he says that he lost a cousin to Italian Vogue. Now, Italian Vogue is what Ken threatens Barry with as he tries to smack him later on in the movie. So that's presumably a threat that would be 85 or above. He almost collides, or he does collide, with what he's imagining is the sun, but it is, well, the sun doesn't have a 75 on it, does it? But it's a 75. So he has a 75 impact when he hits the 75-watt light bulb at the ceiling of Vanessa's apartment, and he has a 10-page impact when he's with Vanessa out in the store. So the total of those is 85. The 32 is the number which shows up when he's trying to land the plane with Vanessa. He's supposed to be going between 300 and 350 knots, so perhaps it's a 1/10 number, but it's a strange one to display, because it should say 320 or something like that, but instead it says 32, and that's the latitude shown in the GPS earlier on in the movie. The bees are very much into a sort of symbolism that you've heard of in many other places. They're very big on the number 3. There are an enormous number of things having to do with 3, including the presumed age of bees as a species. Adams says they've been around for 27 million years. 3 times 3 times 3, 3 to the power of 3, when their actual number is 5 or 80, depending on how you look at it. So the number 27 million, 27 times 10 to the 6th power, 6 being a big number in the movie because it has to do with hexes and hexagons and all the rest, is the potential length of time that bees have to live as a species. And it's a biblical number for similar things. 27 is a number of completion. When Sarah dies, she dies at age 127, and there's another instance as well. So 3 times 3 times 3 is important. And it's important on the plain digital readout. It reads out 27, and then it starts counting down as if the bees don't have much time left. 6, 5, 4, 3, etc. And then there's a 32 on the dial. Now, if you got all the way down to 1, that would be 27,654,321 years, presumably, as the number of years that bees will exist. So there could presumably, it's meant to show that they're in danger and they could be on the brink of extinction, and perhaps they've already died. Because, as I've mentioned in my previous video, there's a strange hallucinatory quality to the whole thing. We don't quite know what's real and what isn't. That's another element, perhaps, of being in this dangerous environment that the bees are in. They don't know quite what's real and what isn't. But bees, honey, was a rare sweetener in the ancient world. They didn't have as many options as we do today, and it was used as a weapon. There are some plants that when the honey is harvested from them, the honey will be hallucinogenic. So armies in the Turkey area and some other places around Europe and Asia would know about this, and they would harvest the honey that was made from the toxic plants, and they would leave large quantity of either the honey or the alcohol, the mead made from the honey, for the other army to consume. Then the army would take it in and eat it or drink it, and they would be paralyzed or pass out or too sick to fight. So you feeding them the honey, which is also a metaphor today for sweetness and light propaganda, like the movie, then they would be disabled. And it's a prank still played today. People will email the script of the bee movie to somebody, to a device that's too small to handle that much data. So when somebody tries to open the device to read what is the bee movie script, the device will crash. Now, there are other instances of the number 3 as well, and particularly with people who interface between the bee world and the human world. The commander of the pollen jocks has what's very rare in the bee world. Most things in the bee world are round or hexagonal, or the human world has more things that are square in it, particularly checkerboard patterns on the floors. And the commander of the pollen jocks has 33 checkerboard alternating colored squares as part of his insignia, like where he would wear his medals and so on. And he somehow knows that the Korea in Delhi is getting its flowers today. So he seems to have some sort of contact and be more of an intermediary between the human and bee worlds. And Bee Larry King is like this as well, as he wears squares in a checkerboard pattern on his tie. And he's very human-like. Vanessa is another one. She has a checkerboard pattern on the kitchen floor of her apartment and hexagonal patterns on the paper on a roll next to the toilet and on the floor. She has a hexagonal pattern on the floor of her bathroom, which is quite unusual among people. The sixing, the hexing is of course everywhere because bees have honeycomb, which is hexagonal, but their architecture deliberately shows other connections to the number 6. They have protrusions from their walls, which go from just being circular outlines to things that push out partway, have some depth to them, so curves to hemispheres. And the hemispheres, some of them sticking out of the wall, also have a circular disc at right angles, like through the equator of what would be the hemisphere, so that the overall look is like a planet with rings, like the planet Saturn, which is the 6th planet from the Sun, and identified in many cases with the number 6. And the corporate structure of the bees is also about hexes, triple hexes. This has to do with the sound of the X and reversing it. So level 1 is they're working for a company with X in the name, Honex. And the next level up is Honesco, and that relies on a reversal of the X sound. It becomes sk instead. So instead of Honex, go, it's Honesco. The higher level beyond that is the hexagon group. So you've essentially got 3 levels of hex, 6, 6, 6 in the coding. There's also 3 former queens who are going to be on B. Larry King's show. And there are 3 sets of 3 days that the bees go through in their education. 3 days of grade school, 3 days of high school, 3 days of college. So there are many sorts of repetitions of these 33 and powers of 3 and hexing going on in the movie. And the bee product itself, hex, is often something associated with casting a spell, which is going to have a vexing effect on someone. And it's associated with things which are initially appealing but can become harmful or intoxicating, such as alcohol, triple X, or certain forms of entertainment, or other intoxicants. So it fits in with a general theme of hexing things in order to use something appealing as a weapon.